Congress passed a law in 1965 which forever changed the face of America. The legislation, called the Open Immigration Law of 1965, had as its main sponsor the Jewish senator from New York, Jacob Javitz. When the bill was passed, Javitz announced with great glee, "Open the floodgates!" And truly, the flood of multiculturalism, multiracialism, and multi-creedalism has overwhelmed us all. Go to any major city in the United States and you will find yourself asking, where am I? Am I in Bangladesh? Am I in Zimbabwe? Am I in Somalia? Surely I couldn't be in America. You see, when any senator pushes through a bill, he is always backed by millions of dollars by some special interest group. The special interest group that leads the charge of immigration's multiculturalism is the Jewish organization known as the Anti-Defamation League, in short, the ADL. The director of the ADL is a Jewish man named Abraham Foxman. Foxman often wears a yarmulke to show the organization's affiliation with Judaism. Through the ADL's early childhood education programs, two curricula in particular, a World of Difference program and the December Dilemma program, which has infiltrated our public schools, the ADL has succeeded by conquest through immigration in destroying white Christian culture in American life. For towns fear the wrath of Jewish organizations like the ADL and the American Civil Liberties Union, a multiplicity of minorities brings only one minority to the top who takes total control. And this Jewish minority, which represents only 2% of America's population, is now in charge. Growing up as a Jew, I saw a lot of double standards in play, if not to say downright hypocrisy. For instance, although we censored public figures for calling us Yids or Abes, we ourselves would call the Gentiles the Goyim. We call Gentile women shiksas, which comes from the Hebrew word shagets, which means unclean animal. But behind closed doors, we called the blacks schwarzes and shooks. Speaking of the civil rights movement of the 60s, Jews were among the leaders, such as Stanley Levinson, key advisor to Martin Luther King, agitating for desegregation. However, quite frankly, when it came to our own neighborhoods, we preferred segregation. In fact, many of my fellow Jews would have considered it a great shame to be so impoverished to be forced to move into a black neighborhood.
What's happened since 1965 was Congress changed the laws, whereas before you could only bring in your spouse and minor children. After 1965, you could bring in extended family.
So that's like grandparents, uncles, aunts.
Before long, you got cousins, in-laws, exactly. So instead of just a nuclear unit coming in, you ended up sort of emptying out whole villages eventually. And that created a chain migration. They didn't really think about what was going to happen. Since 1990, the average number of immigrants coming in this country is this.
Wow.
At 1 million a year. At 1 million a year. At $1 million a year. Okay? At 1 million a year. That's the change that's happened that's probably caused immigration to become a big issue. The numbers have really gone up so much. I mean, we've gone from this traditional level to this is what we're growing every year since 1990.
Well, if you're including people here who are here undocumented,
this is just legal.
This is just legal.
This is just legal.
Regarding Jacob Javitz, it's important to note that his legislation was not accidental. It didn't produce unexpected consequences. What he did was very calculating. I understand that it's common for politicians to pass laws which kind of produce some unexpected results. You know, like you might set up a public housing project and you think it's going to do good for people, and then instead it creates a poverty pocket. But the law created by Jacob Javitz in 1965 is nothing like that. He realized that this was going to open up the floodgates and create unsustainable immigration. Jacob Javitz and Edward Kennedy lied and told them that this law would only apply to a few individuals who wanted to bring extended family members. And that it really wasn't a big deal, and there was nothing to worry about. And Senator Javitz damn well knew that that wasn't the case. But now let's look at Senator Javitz. At the time when he created this legislation, he was already a politician with 17 years experience. And he went on to have over 40 years of public service in politics. And he never lost an election. America was very good to him. But he hated this country so much that he was willing to pass a law that he knew that this would eventually turn the inhabitants into strangers in their own land. Now, I don't want to make an anti-Semitic remark, but in a sense, it's that Jewish mentality. Jacob Javitz was rich, he was wealthy, America had given everything to him, and he had been elected into office for 17 straight years, and yet he was so underhanded that he had to push this bill, and it was a harebrained law. And then he was working alongside other activists who were pushing the theme of racial prejudice. So now our arms were tied so that we couldn't speak against his legislation without being called racist. Interestingly, Senator Javitz was said to have had communist ties, although admittedly this was never proven. The finger can be pointed mostly at Congress and the media. Jacob Javitz created legislation that over a 30-year period increased the population of the United States by a third, almost a third. And it plunged this country into a depression. None of this is unexpected. Everything is going exactly according to plan. And you've got to ask yourself that question about, people who are against Zionism and how they're really justified in feeling this way, because why would this guy, Jacob Javitz, do this? The United States of America has been very good to the Jews. It's a little known fact that since the mid-1600s, the Jews have been well established. They settled in New Amsterdam. There were many people who distrusted them and suggested that they shouldn't be allowed to settle there. But the decision was made was that the Jewish people are no different than anyone else, and they should be allowed to stay here. And since then, they have prospered ever since. But we the people have elected some very underhanded politicians. And I would rate Edward Kennedy to be even worse than Jacob Javitz. Now, let's spend some time talking about where things have led to. If you were to drive to most corporate buildings, the maintenance man who works there is a foreigner. and he's earning often less than half what a maintenance man normally earns. So if you're trying to do construction work, you walk up to him and he has this puzzled expression on his face. He doesn't speak very well in English, in which case he's going to hire people who speak his own native language. And this was all exactly according to plan.
Eventually, we're all going to become some sort of hybrid mix of Chinese and Indian. It's inevitable. They're the two largest populations in the world. So you could run from us now.
They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role. But without that leading role and without that transformation, Europe will not survive.
Zionists control us. And interestingly, it is the Zionists and Jewish extremists who have propelled massive immigration to both Europe and America in a divide and conquer strategy. Now, if that sounds strange and counterintuitive to you, it is simply a fact that's easily proven. The same media and government influence that have supported the supremacist and racist state of Israel is the same media and governments that have supported massive immigration into European and American lands. It is not debatable. It's fact. It's easily proven. In a recent lecture in a university in the Mideast, I posed a question to the academics and the students in the audience, and I share it with you now. I told them, suppose millions of European Christians were coming into your Islamic nation. So many were coming that Europeans threatened to become a majority and your own people to become a minority. The symbols of your faith, traditions, and values of your land were being removed and transformed. Eventually, European Christians and European non-believers would come to control the heartbeat and values of your country. Suppose your people had a low birth rate and didn't want overpopulation in your country because of the social and environmental destruction that overpopulation brings. But millions of Europeans were pouring in, and their birth rates were many times higher than yours. And your children would eventually become like strangers in their own cities and streets. I ask them, is there anyone here who would support this massive European invasion? Anyone who believes it would be good for your nation, for your faith, for your people? The room grew silent. If you do, please raise your hand, I said, and not a single hand went up. Please, I ask again, is there not even one of you who believes this would be a good thing for your people, for your country? And not a single hand rose from the 1,000 hands in the audience. You see, people have an innate ability to recognize truth when they hear it. I asked them if they now understood the European concern about immigration, and the audience rose from their seats and began to clap and cheer for my honesty. Now, does any thoughtful European, not completely brainwashed by MTV and Hollywood's propaganda about the blessings of multiculturalism, does anybody really believe that the invasion of millions of non-Europeans of a different heritage, faith, and tradition from that of Europe is a good thing? Do they really believe that it's a good thing for Europe when the non-Europeans of a passionate religious belief, encompassing religious orthodoxy, get to become a majority and gain complete control over the structure of society and the values and norms of our own society? I understand that Muslims from poor nations and nations of less opportunity have come to Europe for the chance for a better life, and no individual can be faulted for that. But if great numbers of Muslims, including better educated ones, leave their lands, does this not decapitate the intellect and the needs of their own nations?